The point of this discussion is to, which I'm quite excited about, by the way, because I have to tell you, I was a very last-minute replacement for this when the original moderator, Asif, met with an unfortunate, inexplicable accident. We don't know what happened to him, but he couldn't make it, and so I was the only person available to step in and take over. So it worked out rather luckily for me. The reason I was excited about it is because, and I'm going to embarrass her now because she's sitting here, is because Clara is the person who got me to take this subject seriously. So we were at we don't need to name it, but we were at a conference last year which wasn't very good, and there was a panel discussion, and Clara made one or two points about the trajectory of AI, which made me sit up and pay attention to what I might call the immediate tactical requirements for our clients to position themselves in that space. And I was thinking about this for a while, and then earlier this year in Las Vegas, I saw Jason give a presentation which I thought was actually quite shocking in how far it had got, because I was thinking about AI as, you know, basically like the Terminator or things that could play Go. I mean, I hadn't really sort of taken on board how far downstream it's got. And then I discovered there are big banks, Patrick is from HSBC, who are already developing their strategies in this space, and I discovered there are companies like David's that are already delivering. So it was all much more real than I'd been thinking, and that's why I jumped at the chance to chair the panel. So before I get the panelists to tell you a little bit about themselves and their perspective, I just want to frame the discussion by reiterating a little about what was said by Vitek, which is this panel is about real use cases in financial services, but I want to distinguish between the sort of downstream use cases. So I know that in 10 years' time, it's going to be, you know, the bank AI pestering my AI and being watched by the regulator's AI, and I really won't be in the loop at all. And I'm very happy about that because to be honest, financial services is quite boring. I mean, I'm not to you people, but to normal people outside. It's quite boring, and I consider myself a reasonably intelligent person. But I have people in the front row sitting here who will testify that when the company pensions advisor comes in to give us a presentation on options for corporate pensions in view of potential tax changes and shifts in Europe, I have literally no idea what he's talking about. And I'm not stupid, right? But even I can't understand this sort of thing. You put the simple, like, are you supposed to charge VAT when we're mailing live snails to Malta or whatever it was in the office the other day? Who knows? It's impossible, and it's 15,000 pages of stuff. So I'm looking forward to that long-term future when I'm really not involved in this at all. Why would you leave the choice of my pension up to someone like me? That's ridiculous. My smartphone is a superpower that's going to connect me to a mind immeasurably superior to my own. That's a line from H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, because I come from Woking. I'm all for local references. So why would I allow someone as dumb as me to do anything to do with financial services? I don't want that. I want the best possible AI on my side. And I want that AI to go out and outwit the bank's AI to get me the best possible deal. That's the future I want, but that's the long-term future. So what we need to talk about today, and the questions I want to see from you for the panel, are about what that means now. What are the use cases we get started with? What are the real things that we can deliver now that put us on a roadmap to that longer-term future, but don't put off any kind of strategic response until that long-term future is here? And so I think in particular, we have to stop confusing relatively trivial uses of FAQ databases and so on and calling those AI. Now, and the reason we want to have this discussion, of course, is because there are people in this audience here who have both can take advantage of the stuff that you guys are delivering right now. But also, of course, it's Money 2020, it's fintech. We want to spur people out here to go and invent some great new stuff around this. And I've already got one idea, by the way, which is, you know when you go to like websites and they make you do that test to see if you're a person, which is really annoying because I always get it wrong. Like, what are these letters? And I can't see, and I have to take my glasses off, and then I got the letters wrong, and so you have to get it to do the letters again. Couldn't we have an AI that would just do that for us? I mean, like, can't you guys just come? I just want a little plug-in that pretends that I'm a person. That would be really a very good start. And then, of course, there would be an opportunity for somebody in the audience to implement like a reverse Turing test to prove that you're a robot. Because, like, you know what I mean? Like, I might want to give a special offer, but only to AIs, not to people. I don't want to deal with people anymore. They're too much hassle. I only want to give a... So instead of like, can you see these letters? It would be like, how many different ways can you fold this protein molecule so that it will bind to an alpha receptor in 9 nanoseconds? Like, and if you can do that, it proves you're a robot. That's the kind of thing we should be working on. So if anybody says anything dull about chatbots, not interested. There's much more interesting things going in AI, and this is the kind of stuff we want you guys to build. Okay, so I think it would help if the panelists didn't just introduce themselves, but just gave just a couple of minutes of perspective so we can see where they're coming from, and then we'll go to the questions. So, and I have to, by the way, tell you, and it's a badge of honor with me at these kind of events, we have a couple of outline ideas for questions. I don't want to use them because I want to hear a real discussion between experts. I don't want to hear scripts to prepared questions that have been agreed by the PR department and so on. I can promise you that's not what you're going to get, okay? You ask these people honest questions, they're genuine experts, and you'll get honest discussions and you'll learn more from it, okay? So let's start down this. Just give people a little bit of perspective about where you're coming from.
Absolutely. So delighted to be here today and spend some time with you guys. I'm Jason Mars. I've been a professor of computer science and engineering at the University of Michigan for about 5 years. I've taken the last 2 years reduced duty leave of absence to focus on having impact at the next level with Clink, a company we started in 2015 to take some of the discoveries and observations we were making in the lab to solve real problems in human lives. And so we set out with a technology stack that was incredibly powerful and came upon something we felt that was truly a societal problem, which is our stories with our financial lives, right? I mean, you know, when you think of the odious things in life for almost every human, it's reasoning about money, reasoning about what they're doing with their money, how it's going, what's happening with your money. If you wanted to know how much you've spent so far on your trip to Money 2020, that would take you probably too much time than it's worth doing. If you wanted to know how much you spent on your last vacation compared to the one the year prior, that's something that you probably, you know, you'd have to be paid $500 to do that work. So that's painful. That's and it's fundamental. And I think there's an opportunity to have impact with AI to melt away that pain, where you can just articulate to that friend on your shoulder, hey, how much did I spend on that last vacation at bars, right? And that assistant can just tell you, what about the year before that when I was in Orlando? And that assistant can just tell you. And it goes beyond that. I mean, conversationally enabling trading platforms where you can articulate complicated trades without having to click through 5 screens, right? If you have to touch through multiple screens to get something done, that's too much work than could be justified by where the science is. Now, we've started with the focus on the problem, and that's driven us toward a conversational AI, as opposed to finding you know, chatbots to be the kind of buzz of the time. And
so you're a big proponent of voice as the key interface in this space.
I think that voice is very important when it comes to reducing that friction, that complexity. Yeah. To type out some long question, we barely even like doing that with our buddies, right? You'd rather be able to articulate that complicated query more swiftly. That being said, the amount of AI required to solve the voice problem is overkill for the texting problem. And so, anything that language is used to interact, I think that technology is ready to address. And one last point, it's incredibly important to be using the best that machine learning science has to offer. The world of using rules and grammars and parts of speech and reasoning about the grammar rules in a sentence, that's not how we learn language. And now we have the science to have computers use the same methods that a child uses to learn language. And I'm sure we're going to delve in more in this conversation.
Good stuff. We've already had one question in on the question system here about fraud. And I think the guy, he wants to get really good at it. And so the question is, can AI help us to commit better frauds against... I think that's the... No, wait a minute, no, I'm reading this wrong. He's saying, is there a use case of AI to prevent fraud online? Actually, that kind of plays into your hands, doesn't it, David?
Yes.
Is that a real use case?
Well, first of all, I think it is. And my background is analytics and AI for probably 20 years now in financial services. But I did start from the fraud space. I was the CEO and the founder of a company by the name of Actimize for about 10 years. And we used to use AI capabilities to detect patterns without defining rules. And we did a lot of good things for that for the banks. And then we realized about 6 years ago, after we had enough of fraud, that we can use the same capabilities to solve problems of customers. Because we felt that banking is not becoming simpler, it's actually becoming more complicated. With all these new payment themes that you guys are introducing every day, me as a customer, it's very difficult to decide what to do and if. Now, I don't like chatbots, so I'm going to play actually devil's advocate when it comes to chatbot, because I think that if you look at Siri and Google Assist, I like Google Assist because they come to me up front and tell me that I need to do something. Whether in Siri, I need to go in and actually ask for requests. When we started implementing our system about 5 years ago, and we have experience with about 30 million consumers using our capabilities, we started off by allowing them to ask questions. But we realized after a couple of years that you have 2-3% of the individual that will ask things, and there are about 40% of the people that like to do nothing and get things back proactively from the financial institution. So we started to bring it together. We came with an idea that we don't have to wait for you to come in and tell us if I made the payment or not. We can actually reach out to you if we believe that you're missing it and provide you with a capability to do it beforehand. We can learn how you respond to it and then decide next time if this capability is interesting to you or not. And then we can allow you to ask a follow-up question regarding another payment. So we are using conversations, but we're using it in a way to simplify banking. I believe that when I see what people are actually implementing, what they are using, I think there's conversation, there's proactive, and there's execution. I think the holy grail is about execution. Because in the end of the day, I want AI to decide when I need to pay. I need AI to decide which credit card to use. And right now, we are not doing that yet. We're doing micro-saving. We're doing allocation of debt. So we are doing things with AI that decide on behalf of the customers. But banks are concerned about it. They have compliance, they have other capabilities, but that's where the industry is going.
But just to push on this specific use case here, like, do we, in order to do something about fraud, do we actually need AI, or
so
is it just fashionable?
You can solve the problem with a rule. The problem is that once the fraudster changes his activity, then the rule will break and you will not catch it anymore. If you have AI, you can actually learn from the pattern and adjust while the behavior is changing. So, right. So there are fraud companies that exist for 30 years now, and they did not use AI. They did some things that are good, but eventually they broke because when people started to change their activity, when the number of variables is too much, the rules are just breaking.
Okay, so if a bank really wanted to do something about fraud, they could use your AI to spot patterns and whatever. Okay, and so then the Eastern European hackers who've got a copy of your AI would then be using that to produce patterns that would outwit your AI that's working.
And then we can develop a new capability to stop the pattern.
Well, if anybody actually fixed it, we'd all be out of a job. So I mean, we want a long-term path forward on this sort of thing. So every cloud's got a silver lining. Fraud, it gets a bad rap around this sort of place. But let's ask Clara. Actually, Clara, you're more from the kind of investment side of this. So do you want to give us some perspective from?
Well, I am from two sides. Cognitive Finance is an advisory company. Our job is to work with financial services and advise board of directors and senior management on how to embed AI in their strategy. Where do they start? What does it mean? What kind of problems they can solve in their organization using AI? And the AI companies universe is growing at a very fast rate. And our job is to find the best of the best in each category. So for fraud, find the best 3-5 AIs which we can then recommend. So we spend a lot of time understanding and researching the AI space, and we have a very successful and a very good AI, well, sitting right next to me. That's one part of our job. The other part of our job is setting up an investment fund which will invest in AI companies. So one of our advisors said to me that actually we're not a consultancy business, we are a VC company on steroids, because we understand who's moving in the market, and we have, good contacts in the buying space of those AI companies. So it's not necessary to find the good company to invest in, but you also need to be able to help them grow. Because we are moving to a new stage where we invest in companies which will become solid business models. Part of our advisory business looks at two specific cases recently. We've done one was in predicting credit card defaults, and the other one is trying to build an intelligent advisor, like a truly intelligent advisor for banks. So that's what we do.
So talking about the space, at the far end we have somebody that you're all trying to sell things to.
Yes.
So Patrick, are you buying any of this stuff at the moment?
Yeah, we'll buy anyone that comes with a good idea. Like I think our group CEO recently said something like HSBC is a great place for fintechs to come and get rich. So we're happy to look at anything.
That's what we want to hear.
But if I can share some thoughts. So just personally, I was previously the head of innovation strategy for HSBC Group. Since February, I've moved as part of our innovation journey. It's become a lot more distributed throughout every sort of region and business area. So I've now moved into global markets, which is our essentially trading businesses, to be the lead for innovation there. Now, my thoughts on AI is, I feel David's a bit of a skeptic, and he's hoping for, something super wow. And I think that perfectly encapsulates what people say is the problem of AI, is that it's been going on for a very long time, longer than maybe everyone except David has been alive. And you just start to assume that like stuff that happens you're taking for granted and you don't consider it to be AI anymore. It doesn't seem to be wow, right? If you go back in history, and I once made a slide trying to marshal the bank around doing something about AI, was to say, back in whenever it was in sort of the 80s, you had the famous thing where Deep Blue beat Kasparov in chess, and that was considered to be a seminal moment. And then you had the Watson on Jeopardy, and that was a seminal moment. And now I guess you got the AlphaGo thing, or maybe you've got the driving car. And what you sort of see there is this progression of capabilities of computers to say that they take away stuff that used to be done by humans, or that humans were the best at, and we've had to cede that ground to say actually now computers are better at doing it. They're better at playing structured games with very set rules. They're better at playing essentially general knowledge questions, which is the FAQ chatbot that you don't seem that impressed with, but was a major accomplishment at the time. Was to search Wikipedia for the answer to anything. And now they're getting better at essentially what considered to be essentially manual dexterity tasks of driving an automobile in an uncontrolled environment, right? And so this is progress, and people seem to just now accept it as being part of your life. If you go into the personal phone, and David was saying how much he liked Google Assistant, something like, according to Mary Meeker's Internet Trends report this year, something like 70% of all queries into Google Assistant are now by voice. Right? And voice recognition is a thing that, I remember sort of the dragon naturally speaking stuff from when I was a kid, and it's been around for a long time, but it was terrible, right? Like it was frustrating, etc. Where you're seeing the emergence of interest is because in a couple of key areas, like in speech recognition and image recognition, thanks to essentially a number of things, but I suppose I'll defer to Jason here, but mostly deep learning stuff, it's hit that point where it's more accurate than humans. They're better at recognizing images on ImageNet database than a human can do it. They're better at recognizing speech than a human can do it. So suddenly you've gone from this thing where you're nothing but frustrated because it's not as good as asking a human, to it's like, well, I might as well ask him because it's better than asking a human his opinion on anything, pensions or whatever. And this has created an environment now where, partly there's a marketing buzz, but I think it's opened up a range of applications where we can say, for banks and for legal firms and for auditors, I have a lot of very well-educated, very expensive people doing jobs that maybe I can now get a computer to do more accurately. And that opens up a range of interesting possibilities. And if I talk about some specific use cases, because David wanted to push on those, the thing that HSBC is looking at the moment is we actually have a head of AI research, and we have a sort of a lab construct, and he's been working with a government laboratory in Hong Kong called ASTRI, and they've developed a character image recognition model for Chinese characters, for handwritten Chinese characters. Big, interesting area for a bank like HSBC, which we've started to deploy at sort of 90 to 100% accuracy rates for change of address forms, which is a very small use case. But now I can essentially do that completely automated. And we're starting to take that and we're just going to roll it out into now check processing. So I guess they still exist in Hong Kong, but handwritten checks are now going to be, we're going to put in that model there. And that model that we've developed with the research lab, as in our proof of concept testing, has outperformed commercial products from other vendors. So image recognition for Chinese is a very specific use case, but one that's moving into production. In my current business, markets, right, is perhaps the king of all things AI, if you consider that, because electronic trading, automated trading, is a major part of a lot of our business today. If you go into equities or FX trading, something like by number of tickets, 85+% of all tickets are handled without any human intervention. The price is made by a computer. The trade is booked by essentially a computer. The risk is hedged out by a computer. So complete STP on something like 85+% of tickets. And that trend is just continuing to accelerate. And then we have chatbots, which you don't really like. But again, what's really become interesting is that so much of the research has become open sourced. So we have a number of initiatives in using chatbots for customer service, et cetera. But one of the most interesting parts to me is that our own IT guys have just said, well, I can download this library, I can use this framework. And they've started to make chatbots for their own purposes. And one of the most interesting ones is for some system, I don't know what it does, but it's called XSSL. And the guys running that system said they got so annoyed by guys messaging them saying, is the system up? Or whatever, like when's the next down maintenance or whatever, that they made their own little chatbot just so that they could go away and have coffee and not have to constantly be responding to people about whether the system was up or down. So it does a limited number of things, but they were able to just harness this technology for their own use cases. No, and I think that democratization is going to make things interesting.
Our IT department has a similar kind of thing. So you send a message down to them about anything, and you get back a thing which says turn it off and turn it back on again. It's kind of like AI.
That's number one in the help manual.
Right. Let's go to. So, guys, are you ready now to answer real questions from? These are not plants. This has not been rehearsed beforehand. This is real members of the public, sort of, with real questions. So let's go. Okay. So question one: should we let chatbots negotiate Brexit to keep out emotions and get to fact-based decisions? Why do people think that AIs? Because someone's writing that AI, right? That AI is not written by another AI. It didn't arrive from Mars or something. I mean, so this idea that AIs would be sort of better at these things, is that right? Or must the AIs inevitably carry the biases of the people that create them? Tell me something about how you write these things. Is that right? Would it make sense to have chatbots doing Brexit, or would they just contain the same prejudices that we've built into them? Do you know what Brexit is, Jason?
Yeah.
Those might be just a bit specific to this audience. You know?
No, actually, this is where, you know, understanding the right use cases for what is possible when it comes to the kinds of artificial intelligence that we've discovered so far is incredibly important, because you might, I don't know if you guys remember Tay from Microsoft. They unleashed it on Twitter, and it would learn from all the tweets in the world, and it became this profane and offensive PR disaster for Microsoft.
I told them not to follow me, but they wanted to do it as an experiment.
Right, and that is exactly what happens when you get overly zealous with where you place AI. And this is the key place that I think financial institutions in general have a lot of challenge and trouble. They understand the promise from the noise, right? You hear companies and you hear the market screaming that X, Y, and Z is possible. And then you're in this very noisy environment and you're disappointed. And this is what's happening with chatbots. I mean, for us, we've never called our technology a chatbot, and have always been, you know, somewhat offended when people refer to the Clink technology as a chatbot. The problem of understanding human language, where someone can interact with that AI like it's a person in the room, the fundamental problem with chatbots from our perspective is you don't trust them. You don't trust them to be smart. You expect them to break, and they deliver every time at breaking, right? And so this is an experience. If you had a friend where you had to speak in certain ways or they wouldn't understand you and they would break, you wouldn't interact with that friend very often. However, if you could use human, messy, unbounded language, and that AI understands you every time.
But human, messy, unbounded reasoning includes, so how is that going to give a better solution? Because then we just, I want the robots to come and save us. I don't want robots to just do the same crap we're doing, right? So does your AI incorporate your worldview, your emotions, your perspectives?
We try to, first of all, train the chatbot on what should it do or not do, our models, using data, because we believe that that's the only way you can make it take the right decisions. Now, you can't do it for the entire, set of financial problems in the world. I think that's probably the mistake that many, general purpose AI companies do. But when you take a particular subject and you have enough data, then what you're building is much more logical than a human being. And I can give you an example. So we have a capability to decide on behalf of individual when to move money into saving. And the way that we developed it, we took a lot of data. We have a lot of banks working with us. They gave us a lot of data. And we flagged for the model, different scenarios where it was good or bad. But we did not define him a rule. We let him actually learn on its own. We set it to go, and then we came back and we saw that in many cases, on a Friday before people actually go out, that capability took some money out and moved it into saving because that's where they spend it all. That's not something that I would derive on my own. This is something that only a machine can pick up and execute that on the market. So
it's learned from real data.
Yes, and that's, by the way, one of the challenges. You need to partner with the banks to allow you to access that type of data so you can learn. You can't learn it from, it's very difficult. Let's put it this way.
So learning from data makes sense, learning from people, stupid.
Somewhat.
Broadly speaking.
Somewhat.
Yeah, okay, we get it.
But,
Okay, so next question. Clara, how can AI help us to deliver financial services to people who are traditionally excluded? In other words, can we use AI to do something really good with financial, not just make the way we transfer money a bit more efficient or whatever? Can we make financial services better? Can we include more people this way?
Well, I'll just pick up on the previous point. Algorithms have parents, and we have two parents here with us. And it's very important. The reason for which I say this
I'm going to steal that. Do you have that? Algorithms have parents. That's brilliant. If someone hasn't tweeted that already, I will.
Algorithms have parents, and when we look at what the job parents have, I'm a parent, we aim to train our children, prepare them for the life they're ahead of them. So there are some rules, and we have to do it in a responsible way. In the same way, we have to think of designing algorithms in a responsible way. There is no way we can progress and use this technology to make sense and to improve financial services. When people get very excited about AI, we have to understand that AI is an umbrella term, and there are so many other sub-elements of this AI. When we advise our clients, our financial services clients, we not only look at the technical merit of the systems we recommend to our clients, but we also look at how those systems, or if those systems are designed in a responsible way. One of our business partners, she was my second business partner in the business. She's an internationally recognized AI ethicist. And it's very important to have someone like this, with this background in our team. It was very important to me. It's very important for our business. So yes, we can do good with AI. And also, when we get so excited about AI and use all these systems which can do things on their own, we also have to understand that there are branches of AI which can still be used and should be used when designing algorithms to solve different problems in institutions, especially in financial institutions, especially during the customer engagement process. When you apply AI within the organization, there are processes which can be automated in an intelligent way, and that's where AI can also do a lot of good by releasing workers, releasing the workload, the manual and menial tasks, which take so much time of our workday. I used to work in financial services for most of my career. And I remember I did an analysis of how the front office people, which are the clients, the people who are supposed to engage with the client to look after the client's money, they would spend 70% of their time filling in forms and dealing with compliance requests and all that. Those people will benefit by having their time released. But actually, the ultimate beneficiary of this will be the client, because those people, the front office people, will have more time to engage with their client. And there are certain jobs which can still and should remain controlled by human, augmented and helped by the machine.
Well, I can't see, but let me give you an example of what I think that question means. So like Patrick, if this is a kind of, so if you look at, so I'll give you one example, right? So suppose you look at a common problem right now, delivering financial services to refugees. Refugees are excluded from the financial system because they don't have the paperwork and the IDs and so on. But another way of looking at that problem is just let them have bank accounts and then use AI to look at the patterns and track the money and see if, since 99.9% of them will be honest people who are not doing anything wrong, why don't you just give them the accounts? You know what I mean? Like there's the old way of doing things, which is you build the wall and you only let certain people in. But there's a new way of doing things, which is you let everybody in, and then you use AI to look at the patterns and look for wrongdoing and that kind of thing. So are there any discussions about that kind? I mean, don't give away any secrets, but is this kind of thing being discussed in serious banks?
Well, I think the fraud prevention part definitely is, right? And so that's, in fact, we announced essentially a partnership for that fraud detection with we call them an AI company called IASD. The CEO of IASD is a member of our technology advisory board. It goes to one of the things that David said is the traditional way of doing this is around rules. So you set, if you send too much money, and we then have to define what too much money is, right? $10,000 or whatever, then it creates an alert. And as you become a big complex organization, you say, well, $10,000 in the UK is not the same as $10,000 in, I don't know, India. So maybe in India it's $2,000, and it's not the same for if you're like a student versus if you're a very rich person. So you end up with this matrix of thousands and thousands of rules, and they all generate some kind of alert, and people just get swamped in the false positives.
Right.
So and that's in our current business. So one of the use cases that we're looking at is really around how do we make that less rule-based and more intelligent, right? So we'll sort that out, and then we'll see how we expand that. But to pick up on some of the two previous questions about sort of targeting perhaps new people and negotiating things, there was a paper I read just the other day, which I thought was really interesting, from Facebook's AI research group, where they created a chatbot specifically to do negotiations. And so when I was doing my MBA, I took a class in negotiations, and they taught it to do exactly what I was taught, right? It said, if you've got the 5 things that you're negotiating about, you assign some kind of point score to them, and then you try to maximize your score, right? So whatever it is I care about. And we looked at this in sort of job negotiations. MBA students were interested in job negotiations. So do you care about salary? Do you care about location? Do you care about days of holiday? And you rank them somehow and you negotiate that. And their AI chatbot was essentially negotiating, I think, with humans and with other AI chatbots to see if they could maximize the score. And you saw interesting emergent behavior in that, where they basically they found out deception. So they said, I'm really interested in that, which is the thing they're not interested at all. So 2 stages down the line, they could say, okay, I'll give that one for you. So they made a concession, and then they could get a concession for something else.
So Facebook taught their AI to lie, or their AI
determined that was an optimal strategy to maximize their score at the end of it, right? But if you go into how that helps people,
but the AI ethicist,
you can talk about the ethicist, but where could this be useful, right? So where are people who in particular, because you said you were a sort of a mentor for women in fintech or whatever, who typically is disadvantaged in any kind of negotiations? They always say it's women. Women are typically disadvantaged when they negotiate their salary from the day that they get their first job. What if their salary was negotiated for them by the AI chatbot? Or if you took the other sort of high value purchase, where I always personally feel at disadvantage, is with the car salesman, right? I'd love my chats, my sales book to negotiate with Tesla about they want the custom painting versus the leather interior or whatever.
Right.
And they
That's
could do that.
idea.
And that could really, at some point maybe we'll have, we'll be protecting people that feel disadvantaged at that, marketplace negotiation as they negotiate with the Tesla chatbot for whether they're going to get the red
I definitely want a chatbot to do my negotiations for me. Right, let's go on to the next question here. So, and this is very specific to financial services. Other people have different. Financial services is a very regulated business, and we all want it to be that way. So for AIs to be delivering real advice, making real decisions for people, blah, 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 they're going to have to fit into that regulatory structure. How do we deal with it when things go wrong? How does your proto-experiments in this space, how does this work? If your AI tells me you need to go out and buy Tesla stock, and then I take a bath on it, right? And I come back and say, well, you missold me, this kind of thing. Is it you I sue, or is it the bank, or is it the software people? Just to clarify for the lawyers in the audience.
So first of all, putting AI in a bank system is very difficult. And I remember when we started, we had the testing people coming to us and say, how do we test this? Because they don't understand that the logic is not rule defined, and so it's very difficult to test. So it took us a lot of time to try to create some separation between the decision and the actual interaction, what we do with it. And I think in the end of the day, we landed with the idea of creating a pure AI for the decision, and then allowing the bank to put a policy, fences around the actual execution. So it can't be more than X. So it has to be limited by approval if the transaction goes too much, because eventually it's going to be very difficult for you to get an approval by a big bank to put a system without any limitation to decide for my benefit to move money, make a mistake, and then I get sued. So that separation, that idea of decisioning and execution, with allowing the bank to fence it and to test it, that's what we were able to come up as a strategy to implement these systems.
So do you have to sign complicated contracts which say that it's all your fault if it goes wrong?
Well, those are always par for the course, but we've come to realize in the market, this is absolutely true, that you have to be very, very checkable and testable. So we're launching next month with a top 10 bank, July 7th. And the process of going through those checks has been very interesting. One thing that's nice is we're observing that via some of the innovation lab structures, they're much more ready to sandbox and test. However, we have to put in a lot of tools in the system that allow for specifying the behavior of the system. So when it comes to the understanding, there's a lot more freedom in terms of the system can understand with flexibility, but when it comes to action and response, those actions and response need to be clearly defined. And having a system...
But surely a hallmark of AI is genuine learning and emergent behavior. So if somebody calls up and says, hey, wait a second, your AI is fixing LIBOR with our AI, and we go, wait a second, we didn't tell it to fix LIBOR, how has it figured this out, right? That's someone's fault.
Sure.
Someone has to carry the can for that.
Sure.
David, sorry.
No, please. I'm genuinely curious.
The point I just wanted to add here is that we need to be able to play back and interrogate the systems. And that's how we need to design them from the beginning. And whether they go ahead and do whatever they want to do, one, it has to be checkable, exactly as you said, Jason.
Yeah, that's true.
But also we need to be able to play it back, interrogate, exactly as you interrogate a human, or ask one of your employee as an institution, what have you done? What happened then? What was your line of reasoning? Without that capacity, we are in an interesting space.
Playback, that's a really interesting point.
And this is unfortunately, right now, there's a lot of risk aversion when it comes to empowering AIs to take a mind of its own. And so maybe now isn't the time to be kind of exploring, those kinds of treacherous behaviors. You've got to crawl before you can walk. And so doing something impressive, but also adding the security of making it checkable, verifiable, I think is the right thing to do today.
Every chatbot needs an off switch.
Absolutely. This is a very important point.
No, I've captured it. I'm going to do that in the right.
It's very important.
Let me ask a next question for Patrick and for Clara here. So someone's asking, if you're from the financial services organization point of view, right now the sort of broad options you're looking at are you can start building up your own expertise, you can partner with some of the big players, IBM and so on. You can start looking around the fintech space and so on. I know this is very early days and so on, but roughly what is your strategy around this stuff? Is it build up your expertise, go with the fintech's partner? Where are you focusing at the moment?
I'm going to say maybe all three. So
you're sounding like a consultant.
I think it's important, and that's why we put into place sort of our innovation lab structure, is that we needed in-house experts to be informed buyers, right? I don't think it's going to be in the long term our role to create a system. I think there are smarter people out there that can do that. And even if we were just as smart, then you have issues of essentially life cycle maintenance, and do you really want to devote so much of your time to running a little software company inside, right? Maybe historically we've done too much of that. But that said, we can't just have every person knock on our door and say, well, I've got the solution to all your problems. And I always say, okay, so stop telling me about the magic jelly beans. What does it actually do, right? So we need informed buyers in this. So we do need internal expertise. And then whether it comes from a big company or a small company that just got acquired by a big company, which is probably what will happen, I'd say we're indifferent to that.
So you don't have any sort of particular... So are there, presumably the fintech ecosystem out there is quite rich in the AI space. I mean, there must be a lot of companies starting up in this space. So it's pretty hard to pick any winners in there. So you have to cast the net fairly wide, right?
Yeah. And to pick up on his point, when reasoning about the promise, use your senses, right? Seeing is believing. Playing with it is believing. That's how you know. There's a lot of companies that will kind of create these great pitches, but when you actually play with their tech, you wouldn't want to give your kids their tech, right? Because your kids will be like, why am I wasting my time with this? Think about, would I give my millennial son or daughter or my teenager this technology to play with, and would they be delighted? If the answer to that question is yes, you might be onto something.
Okay, let's. I have two more quick questions I want to squeeze in before the end of it, because they're both really good questions. So first of all, there's this issue about trust, which a couple of you have brought up. So how do you get remember, consumers don't understand how any of this stuff works, right? Consumers don't understand how a photocopier works. They don't understand how any of this stuff works. So how are you going to get consumers to trust this technology? What's the key to getting the trust?
I can answer that. So what we do, we prevent the marketing teams of the bank to inject any campaigns into our system. And when we tune it correctly, we focus on one thing: making the customer engaged and happy. So the tuning itself, the way we build it, is measured against, are we making the customer happy, satisfied? Are we giving him good advice versus can we sell him another product? Once you're able to put that aside and start with a system that is focusing on doing good for the customer, you can build trust.
So don't let marketing people
Right.
thing. Okay, got that.
And
Clara?
And I think that more and more banks do understand that trust is an important part of their strategy.
Right. And if it works, I mean, it just has to work, right? That actually is the first basis of trust. The promise that you make, the technology you deliver to your customers and your members, if it works, that's a good starting place. Oh.
So we have.
Can I just add to
No,
this?
please.
One quick point. You build trust when your customers know that you provide a dependable service. And that's number one. And second point is when your system is capable of delivering personalized and anticipate needs. That's when you build trust. So for once, forget whether we talk about engaging with technology. How do you build trust with humans? Dependability, predictability, and personalized take. So when your friend calls you and says, like, I know you like your gin and tonic with 3 cubes of ice. Well, that's good, no?
So you think the trust thing's not such a big barrier? You think that's...
Trust is massive, but we are in the industry of trust. People say that only recently we've been discussing to reintroduce trust in our industry. But trust has always been at the core. It's the birthplace of our industry from the very early days back in Italy. That's the core of what we do. And we need to make this technology work for us. And we are, as an industry, once in a lifetime, in a point where we can truly, for once in the at least past 50 years or 100 years, we can build a truly personalized service for our clients. This is huge. Technology helps us.
Well, look, thank you very much for being honest with us and giving us your genuine opinions about these things. The audience really appreciated it, and I'm sure they're going to want to talk to you some more about it afterwards. I'm sorry we didn't get to the vocabulary question because somebody asked, do we need to train AI to understand the specific vocabulary that applies in banking? Some of the vocabulary I've heard in dealing rooms, you really wouldn't want
That's right.
your AI to get hold of.
Yes.
But I just want to
Yes.
I just want to finish on one tactical point. So one thing that I drew out of what several of you said was that in order for these systems to be successful, they need vast quantities of data. You've got to be able to feed that data in for them to learn anything. And that makes data a different kind of resource in this new AI world from what it is now. So it means the focus on data as a strategic component of banks going forward has to start now. They can't wait until these AIs
Absolutely.
are all in place. So thank you for flagging that up for me. That's a really good point to draw out from it. So in conclusion, we're going to ask our AI how it came to a decision, but it's going to lie to us anyway. So guys, thank you very much for taking part in the discussion.